Welcome back to the show. It's episode 131. We're joined by, you have to use your real name. We can't call yourself Riel and then put a bunch of Greekish sounding 20-word letter names, whatever.
Riel Roussopoulos.
Yourself effectively kosher or non-kosher as this may be.
Riel Roussopoulos.
That is the coolest name. Is that the name your mother gave you, or did you make that up?
No, that's the name my parents gave me. I'm named after a Canadian revolutionary, Louis Riel. There was a very short list of potential names. I guess it was that, or I forget what the other one was. But yeah, there's not a lot of Canadian revolutionaries. So short
I was
list.
like, Canadian revolutionary. What did he do? Like, pour maple syrup all over himself and danced at the top of the CN Tower or something?
He tried to stop the railroad from being put across the country. He was Métis, and so there's a famous Battle of Batoche, 1849, I believe, or somewhere in that vicinity. And he was later a senator. He had a really interesting character. He escaped that, went to the States for a while, and then was elected to the Senate, and then was hanged, and was for a long time was like, a bad guy or whatever. And then I think in like 84 or something, the Canadian government made him a Canadian hero and gave him like a posthumous award or something. Like he got a whatever. Anyway, so he was a very interesting character in Canadian history. In what is otherwise a very a relatively boring history when you compare it to a lot of other histories of the world where there's a lot more combat, shall we say, in the history. He's one of the more interesting sort of figures in Canadian history.
Fascinating. A fellow Canadian we have here today. I don't have to pretend to memorize American historical facts to pretend to be interesting to
or say Z or
we the people of the United States in order to form a more whatever. You're proudly Canadian. You do have a red layer on your cubic microphone stand thingy.
I do. That's very sales oriented as opposed to I just like the black, red, white. That to me, the for sale sign is the kind of the ultimate commerce colors. just get right to it.
No, I'm always nervous whenever I meet someone for the first time, or like we chatted before. But whenever someone's like has like a sophisticated microphone or flashing lights in the background, and then I'm like, "Oh, hi! Would you like to be on the Impossible Puzzles show?" Oh, even better.
I can soften the vibe here. My buddy here he's always got my back with thumbs up.
Amazing. I've learned that whenever I reach out to someone and they happen to have a microphone handy, or there's like two people on one screen, I've always learned, or whatever. I've always learned be like, okay, Michael.
I have my background selections depending on what call I'm on.
Oh, my favorite of the Mexican plants. Make sure the rabbis are not watching the recording. If they do, we could say, "You told me the internet was bad. To know that I was sinning, you had to minorly sin." Oy vey.
We're back to the void here.
You're a famous. Is the term famous, or is it more like
infamous? I don't know.
Infamous. That's the word. That means that famous, but as a marijuana, you're like a Canadian. What's the term? Marijuana influencer.
I am a cannabis influencer. Yes, the term. I'm focused on e-commerce and the technology side more so than necessarily. I'm not out doing. I mean, I do sample plenty of things, but the influencer part of me is more around helping the business owners who are in the arena, shall we say, use marketing to their advantage is really where the last 10 or 12 years of my professional career has shifted to, I mean, it's a, you know, it's a uniquely Canadian niche where it's legal here, as you probably know, and unlike the US where there's patchy, you know, it's a state by state regulation, and because it's federally illegal there, there's still no real e-commerce. You can't buy with a credit card, and like you can reserve and then go pick it up, but the actual transaction doesn't happen the way a true e-commerce transaction happens, the way it does in Canada, where we can actually pay for, you know, delivery on a credit card, it gets delivered. Like it's, you know, it's like Amazon, right? You're able to do proper e-commerce in Canada, which is really unique in the world. So
Fascinating.
It's a fun niche. It's the classic, you know, if you what is it, you know, you can be big in small ponds or whatever. Like, it's a very small niche, and I get to be you know, the top of the food chain, and you know, me and maybe 4 or 5 other people in the world are you know, at my level of e-commerce in the cannabis space.
Fascinating. Oh, so in America, there isn't like OCS.ca where I go
No.
on and I spend as much money until my wife sees the credit card statement and goes, "You bought how many animals? Are they kosher? What, an ounce? Oh, no, an ounce. You know, we bought a kilogram of rice.
Right.
This is but an ounce.
An ounce. What's an ounce?
The THC is below 9%.
Not if you're buying from the OCS, it's not. They have a requirement. It has to be above 26% or they won't carry it anymore. It's actually pretty bad.
I gotta get my facts straight, or else fact checking.
Yeah.
You like what you do, or you want to throw yourself out the window?
Oh no, I love what I do. Are you kidding? It's a constantly evolving space, and I love being in an industry that is still figuring itself out. I think I've always enjoyed that 0 to 1 phase of a business, you know, where you're trying to figure out what resonates with the market, what's the right pricing, so this cannabis just is in that phase still. I mean, it's more developed now. We've had legalization now for what, 8-9 years now, so it's, you know, it's not nascent, but it's still, from a industry standpoint, it's very early in its evolution, which I find interesting.
Fascinating. And I'm not just saying this as you know, to all those who are like, well, you can't have a guest unless you know what they do. Oh, I know. I will make sure to sample the products before the. Do people call you a drug dealer, or would your mother say that you're not a good lawyer, doctor, engineer? How does it work at the familistic levels?
I'm just a marketer to my family. I've always they'd say I'm a marketer. My kids like to say that I work in weed, and I'm a weed marketer. We did for my old company, which was, we do websites, right? So the best promo we had were these shirts that said "weed dealer" on the back. Everybody wanted a one of those when we would go to trade shows and stuff like that. But no, I describe myself as a marketer.
Is fascinating topic here is marketing of, I guess, not we don't use the term drugs, we use the term, and cannabis is the colloquial term. Is the market, being a marketer in the space of the cannabis, is that, there's got to be someone who's like, oh, you're pushing the crime, you're pushing the drugs on the children. You know, Nancy Reagan would say, oh, say no.
I think I've been so in this industry for so long. There's nobody in my orbit who thinks that way necessarily. Once in a blue moon, I'll hit somebody who, you know, has some outdated sort of ideas about cannabis. But I think, you know, the data is very clear. Alcohol is a much more impactful social problem than cannabis is. You know, there are lots of health benefits to cannabis as well. People, you know, who are doubters. Queen Victoria used to use cannabis oil as her rudiment. And as we were talking about originally, the recipe for holy anointing oil in the Bible had cannabis in the exactly had cannabis. I looked it up just to refresh myself here. So in Exodus 30:22-25, it says the recipe for holy anointing oil is 500 shekels of pure myrrh, 250 shekels of sweet cinnamon, 250 shekels of sweet calamus, which is the King James translation. But calamus, is cannabosum, is the sweet smelling cane, which many argue is actually cannabis, not calamus. And then 50 shekels of cassia. So this was something, and a hin of olive oil. So this was a recipe that a number of years ago I created just out of curiosity, and it smells like if you're familiar with what's the Fireball whiskey, it has that cinnamon kind of smell to it. That's what it smells like. It smells like Fireball whiskey. It was interesting. I've always been interested in the history of cannabis, and it goes back both ceremonially and medicinally in a whole bunch of different cultures, way further than people realize. The Aramaic, one of the Aramaic traditions was essentially hot boxing. They had these kind of triangle things that had canvas on it, and they would put a metal bowl at the bottom of it with coals in it, and they would put cannabis leaves on it, and then they would stick their head into it's like a little tent basically. And if you think about it, it's your hot boxing in a little tent.
Literally, the box is hot. Are you advocating that everyone should always be stoned, and there are even religious elements and significances?
Well, not always,
in the Jewish tradition.
Well, I'm not of the Jewish faith, so I can't confirm these, but I mean, from what I have been able to read and some people that I've spoken to about it, it seems pretty clear that cannabis was part of, the general sort of culture. There's also a lot of debate as to, the kind of in various Orthodox religions, there's a tradition of kind of walking through with the whatever, the sort of hanging thing with the burning smoke, and there's again this
contact high, if you will.
This could very well have been cannabis at one point in time, and been replaced with other things as time went on. But yeah, I think there's a lot of evidence to show that cannabis was used as a way to put yourself into a state where you would then maybe be more open to religious suggestion or communication, or why not? It's certainly not the only shamanic practice that involved changing your mindset.
It's fascinating. I'm just absorbing this. There may have been some pre-studies earlier this morning of the edible nature. Oh, my wife may or may not be listening. We are being recorded, so I can't get away with murder here. But man, that plant is something else. What's going on with the THC, and how does this magical Mexican plant naturally produce Jewish creativity that fuels the economy? And all the venture capitalists, can't be placing bets without getting stoned out of their mind. Explain the magic here.
So first of all, I want to correct something, because you said the Mexican plant, and historically it comes from the Middle East and not Mexico. The reason the word marijuana is actually a pejorative term that was developed by Ainslinger as a marketing campaign. It's fascinating when you look at U.S. history. So Ainslinger was the head of the FDA, but he previously, before Prohibition, he was the head of Prohibition. So basically, he was a cop who no longer had anyone to bust, and and if you think about historically what was going on at the time, the Mexican Revolution had just happened, and William Randolph Hearst had huge forest tracts in Mexico that had been taken back by the Mexican government, basically. So he had a bone to pick. There was a few other ones. DuPont, right around that time, had developed nylon as well, and so they didn't. Cannabis was a threat. There was an article in Time magazine in 1936 that was called "The $1 Billion Crop," and it was about hemp. And the Ford Motor Company developed a car that ran on hemp oil because Ford could see Standard Oil had a choke on oil, so he was trying to come up the side with another alternative fuel source. And if you know any history of Ford, I mean, he's a horrible anti-Semitic, so that's another side of it. But I mean, he had rubber plant, like he understood vertical integration at a level that most companies now even dream of. He had rubber plantations for his rubber, and so he actually, there's a hemp car that he developed out of polymer, out of hemp, what is essentially plastic but made from hemp. And this was all in like 1936, for pre-war time. And they wanted, this was a competitive thing, right? So what do we do if we want to get rid of a plant that is a major crop? It's also, it's a feed source for animals. It's it was the major crop in the US. Washington planted hemp. Like there's a long tradition of using hemp for rope and for canvas, and the Levi's jeans were all made out of hemp originally. Like this was the cloth and the fiber plant that was used commercially, and so there were lots of economic interests that wanted to see it gone. Cotton being one of them, DuPont with nylon and stuff, and then Hearst with paper. These were all industries that were threatened by the cannabis plant, as well as oil, of course. And so a bunch of them basically got together, funded Ainslinger to create the hemp for the Marijuana Madness movie you may have heard of, where it's, you smoke Reefer Madness. Sorry, Reefer Madness is what it was called. So anyway, they completely invented the word marijuana and associated it to darkies and Mexicans who, jazz musicians are smoking the reefer and they're gonna steal your women, and
they'll steal your daughter away from the church, and the Jews are gonna get you.
Right, exactly. So I mean, they created a boogeyman and had to call it something that the farmers wouldn't recognize, because if you get a bill passed that you then now need the marijuana tax stamp if you're going to grow the hemp crop, right? So they basically got this passed as a law in Congress as a subterfuge, essentially, because hemp was a predominant crop at that time. So going forward, if you were going to grow hemp, which is the same plant as cannabis, it's just how much THC is in the plant is the only difference, really, right? But so they created this thing called the Marijuana Tax Act, which required you to get a very expensive tax stamp, which of course then everybody switched to corn or to other crops that weren't as onerous and problematic. But the word marijuana was literally invented to make it sound like a Mexican plant for racist purposes, for the American populace to just like, hey, look over here while we pass a fast one on you over there. And then they had to reverse that in the war. And there was actually a hemp for victory. If you look at like old war posters,
I'm Googling
hemp for victory, you'll see the government needed, during wartime, they needed hemp for rope and sails and webbing and uniforms and all kinds of things that they needed for the war. So they had to incentivize farmers to plant hemp during the war, and then they repealed it again afterwards, ironically. But yeah, the word marijuana is pure propaganda.
Oh, so okay, I'm just getting up to speed here.
This is like soapbox stuff for me when I'm fascinated by the corporate history of like this was a very early on example of lobbying successfully to sort of have regulatory capture around driving a competitor out of the market, and all of the bullshit around oh, it's bad for you and it's addictive and all of that stuff is just literally was propagandized to push this narrative of well, and also we can debate the racial connotations of after slavery in the US, we prisoners make a really good population to use the same tactics of printing license plates or what. I mean, it still goes on now with the private prison industry in the US, right? So
Right. It's
I believe strongly that marijuana was it was a good excuse to lock up a bunch of people that you otherwise didn't have a good excuse to lock up.
Fascinating, and you'll have to elaborate on some of your deep history. I love it. Whenever I've spoken to someone and they're like mega pro weed or cannabis, let's use the term cannabis perhaps, but like when they're pro cannabis, and then I'm like, pro cannabis, yeah, but you're just the smoky, and they're like, no, Merker, you're the smoky. I have done research. I can show you. I know I have. You're not even reading off anything. I'm over here reading on my computer about this and about okay, we got a fact. Harry J. Anslinger, talking about an American government official, and but this by heart. You have studied this. You have done the history. You're laughing. You're Canadian.
This has been part of my yeah. I mean, again, I just like you. Originally I thought medical cannabis was much more around medical cannabis was kind of a just a way around the rules to be able to get cannabis because you wanted to get high and stuff. And when you've actually spent time in the industry, you realize there are huge sections of, particularly around any of the seizure sort of, if you have any kind of disease that gives you seizures, that's one of the things that cannabis has an amazing effect on, that our kind of pharmaceutical industry is not able to give something that as effective. There's some great like MS, patients who suffer from MS and stuff where they'll show them, there's great videos on YouTube of somebody putting cannabis oil under their tongue, and within minutes just you can see like how much they relax and they're no longer shaking and stuff. Yeah, there's a number of different sort of medical uses that are very very proven. Well, and again, back to the Jewish side, what's his name, Meshulam? There was an Israeli researcher, Meshulam. I can't remember his first name now, but he's the one.
Yeah,
he's the one who discovered the cannabinoids. We have a cannabinoid receptor system in our nervous system that is tuned to this plant, and before that, and before the 80s or so, that wasn't even, nobody knew about it. He discovered it and was a pioneer in kind of early research on how it could be, why it was reacting with cannabis. And like, so we have these receptors in our, like this plant must have been part of our heritage for a lot longer than people realize, if our body has cannabinoid receptors in our body to receive this. You know what I mean? Like, you think about it, like why would it have such a regulating effect on our body unless it had been part of our our food system and our ecosystem for thousands of years, right?
It's fascinating. And yeah, just to add to that, of course, yeah, Dr. Rafal Mushallam was an Israeli organic chemist, widely known as the godfather of cannabis research. I'm reading off Wikipedia. His decades of work at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem laid the entire scientific foundation for modern medical cannabis. Now, this is not in no ways a political podcast at all. I don't know even the first thing, but I always joke. Maybe I've joked privately, now publicly and recorded, but I always joke that like Okay, everyone who like is anti-Semitic or anti-Israel, okay, I can't, I'm not here to dispel your feelings or whatever. But you can't be like smoking a joint on Facebook, sending people WhatsApp images of like anti-Jewish stuff. I'm like, you can't Google search, gather information using ChatGPT with WhatsApp and Facebook while smoking a joint and being like, "Oh, those Jews are coming after us," and on a phone. Because all that stuff's like a bunch of Jewish researchers put those stuff together anyhow, including cannabis research. And then people are like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's all a bunch of Israeli. You think that iPhone 17? You think that was made by a guy in California? Half the phones are like Israeli army gear from 30 years ago."
Yeah, the Israeli tech industry is obviously a big powerhouse in the world generally. No, why they're so good at that, that's a whole other conversation, but let's just skip that.
we will not. We're not for or against anything serious here, but I always find it fascinating. Or getting back to the main scheduled program, the body, the human mind, the body has receptors. There's like stuff. There's like hardware. There's human biological hardware.
Literally hardwired to receive it. It's not like we have that for aspirin or for other drugs. It's only cannabis that has this, our whole system, like
the whole system. It's like nervous system, blood
tied right in there.
Cannabis system. I guess it's called the cannabinoid receptors. Is there anything else on the planet that even interacts with these biological mechanisms that cannabis is deemed
not that I'm aware
to
of. Not that I'm aware of.
If there were, I would smoke that and tonight. Oops, I said. Do you feel also a bit tangential to this? In what ways has weed or marijuana, cannabis use, made you a better marketer?
I don't know about I mean, you can ask my wife what happens when I don't smoke weed for a few weeks, and I get a lot more uptight and tense. And I think, in general, it just is a relaxing, creative, kind of inspiring tool, I suppose you could say. It definitely, contributes to me having both, I think, curiosity, the creative side, and then just generally, like, I have no stress in my life. I don't, I'm not, people ask me if I do Botox and stuff, and it's like, no, I'm pushing 60, but I don't look it. I'm, yeah. And I believe that cannabis has a lot to do with that. I don't know. I mean, I can't prove that, but yeah, as I said, my wife encourages me to smoke it if I'm off of it for a while. You get a little kvetchy there. What do you smoke a joint or something?
Hey, you're using all the. You prepared a list of like 100 Jewish.
I grew up in Montreal. I grew up in like right in in square in the middle of Jean Mance, and right. I had lots of Jewish friends growing up, so it comes natural. It comes naturally to me. The kvetchings and the schlepping some stuff around. Oy.
And, this is actually a beautiful layer of wisdom here, where we have that it's your wife who is the one who's kind of like, all right, get those get that Indian hemp, get the byproducts going over here, and she is the is this a wisdom of marital advice when the husband's a little bit too much marketing media heavy and too much going on, and then the wife's like, all right, you had a busy day, that Jewish guy's talking about weed, we need to get you out of the house.
I think anybody who doesn't, who has an issue with it as just a general, way to relax. I mean, in the same way that you might have, a scotch at the end of the day, or to me, I don't I'm not that I don't drink alcohol I mean, I will if I'm out and, but it's not my go-to at home, either smoking or I like beverage drops. They make drops that you can just add into whatever drink. So, I can just make like a nice little bubbly water and, with a little bit of juice in it, and then put in a few drops into the drink, and boom, you've got a nice cannabis beverage. That's my evening go-to. And then same thing for sleep. Like most people are, there's you hit a certain age, you wake up 3 times to go to the bathroom, you wake up with sort of aches and pains in the morning, and all of that stuff. I find if I take 5 or 10 milligrams of oil in a little capsule before I go to bed, I sleep better, I wake up rested, I sleep through the night. I don't have those kind of aches that you might have otherwise. So
Hey, don't make fun of my Jewish back problems.
To each his own, but I highly recommend trying that versus a lot of the medications that doctors will end up prescribing have all kinds of side effects and stuff. And to my knowledge, the side effects of cannabis are munchies, basically.
The side effects are you eat your wife's cooking without complaining.
Exactly.
Michael, where are you?
Everything just seems a little easier to deal with.
Why does it smell like a skunk? Oh, the skunks are out again. And
terrible.
Where's that? Why did I get that receipt for pepperoni pizza with extra bacon? Oh, that was they planted on me.
Extra bacon, Mike? Are we? That doesn't sound very kosher.
It was planted on me by my girlfriend. I mean, Michael. I know we've gone far afield. Are you? What about many fruitful elements here? Do you feel that? Not just the marketing and behind the scenes, the business side, but do you feel that you are involved in the spreading of relaxants or cannabis as a peaceful product? Do you feel that a guy selling websites, a guy selling shoes, a guy runs a manufacturing thing and he's making 1 million shoes this year? I don't think he goes home and was like, oh, I'm so not just do I have the kosher bacon and the gelt and the money, but that 1 million people will wear shoes. Oh, so beautiful.
Yes, the short answer is yes. This is Legalization Journeys is one of my content plays where essentially I ride around to different events and cities and stuff and tell the story of various growers and dispensary owners and stuff. So I very much consider myself somebody who is a advocate and helping to normalize cannabis in our society. I think it's a maligned, through a bunch of PR for years. It's gotten a bad rep, and frankly, it deserves to be treated like any other industry. I mean, there's now, it's a $9 billion industry in Canada, I believe, and still growing. It employs thousands of people. Why would you not support something that again is really at the end of the day an agricultural product, as from where I sit. Not, I mean, it's regulated like a narcotic, but it and there's definitely elements of it that that are a drug, but it's a plant at the end of the day, right? So
fascinating. And I'm just on your website here for legalizationjourneys.com, and we're going to put it in the description below on the YouTubes. And what inspired you, Riel and men with funny sounding last name, what inspired you to go on such a journey to such an extent that you want to record and share and journalize the experience you want to tell?
I think it's just really my my love of the industry. The stories that people hear about cannabis are typically the worst version of cannabis. It's either a bunch of public companies who've ripped off millions of dollars and and gone to zero, and these executives are paying themselves millions of dollars of salary while they lose money. And the public company going to zero is one of the big narratives. And of course all the illegal drug bust at a border or whatever. And really the people that I know in this industry are like me. They're passionate about it. They love what they do. They're they have gone through a journey. Typically, if they have any history with it, they had to do it clandestinely. Maybe they have a record, like they've just it's much more blue collar than people realize. And I just think it's really important to share their stories of just this is hard work. This is a farmer who has a specific crop, or an entrepreneur who's trying to open retail stores. And I mean, it's a much more accessible culture at the end of the day. And I feel like those stories aren't being told. And my marketing, often part of helping clients is helping them figure out what resonates with consumers for them. And so there's a fair bit of storytelling in what I do anyway. And this just made a nice vehicle for me to be able to kind of wrap the
Yes.
what is essentially prospecting, and it's the way that I'm able to do work. Like, if you ask, I mean, you do it yourself, right? There's a power to being the person that says, here, come on my platform and tell your story. People are open to that, right? And so from there, there's relationships that grow, and you're able to introduce other opportunities. But I've always used content as a vehicle, if you will, for it's much easier to open a door when you're telling their story than it is to say, let me try and sell you my website thing, or once I have that relationship, then you're much more open to those kind of approaches, right?
You are Jewish. Oh, I said too much. I always tell people that. How many times, even this week, someone reaches out to me, they're like, I got this great tool. I'm a great technologist. Michael, what do I do? And I'm like, well, does anyone know about the tool? They're like, what do you mean know about it? I have the cure for cancer here. I'm like, well, it's not the cure for cancer.
Yeah.
Does anyone
who's yelling from the rooftops that you cured their cancer? That's the story that will propel
marketing
that.
And I think on my end, I don't know how it will come out in the recording, but I can't see you on my side for some reason. Are you off camera a little bit?
No, I'm still on. I knocked my mic there.
No worries.
And that dropped, but I still see myself in the window here.
Perhaps it will come out all right in the recording. Moving on in this raw format. You have always been a lover of cannabis, Riel, or were you indoctrinated anti-indoctrinated by the fact that so many people said it's not cool or not kosher that you have to do it, like me?
No, I think I got introduced to it in my 20s when I moved to Vancouver, and Vancouver was just the economy in Vancouver is powered by cannabis. Everybody I knew had a little basement mortgage helper, as they would refer to it as. And I just, that was the term. If you told somebody you had a mortgage helper in the basement, that was code for you were growing weed in your basement in BC.
It's like if you talk to someone from Texas and they're like, well, of course I have a gun on me right now, and in the car and at home, and my wife has one and she's a better shot. In Vancouver, in BC, in British Columbia.
The mortgage
got a good
helper
angle up you there. We got weed in the basement, growing it oneself. Is that, I never actually grew it myself. I have a neighbor who grew it a couple years ago, and it started peeking through the fence outside. You need a good. It's a lot of work to grow it.
It's a huge amount of work. I mean, you can grow crappy weed very easily, but to grow good weed is definitely a lot of work. I have a lot of I have no problem paying good money for good weed because I know how much work it is to grow good weed.
To those who are still on the fence and they don't know if they're ready for that first toke or buying their first bong, or they're a very light user, what do we say to them to aggressively push them off the fence?
Well, first of all, I don't know that you need to aggressively push anybody into anything that they're not comfortable doing. But from a trial point of view, I mean, smoking and ingesting cannabis have very, very different effects. Onset time, the type of high. So I do think the more friendly onboarding, if you will, of somebody who hasn't tried cannabis would be to try gummies or an oil or some sort of edible. The beverages are also nice. There's a whole range of cannabis beverages now out that range from sort of 2 to 5 and 10 milligrams tend to be the dosage. In Canada, you can't have anything more than 10 milligrams per serving, and that's a good place to start. 5 to 10 milligrams is a good place for a beginner to start. My wife still, 1 10 milligram drink is plenty for her. She's good at that point. I need like 5 or 6, but I'm a more I'm
We
a
have
more
worked up.
I'm
We've
more of a
worked up.
veteran consumer, shall we say. But yeah, I always recommend that because smoking is, although again, it's a very different high and it hits a lot faster. So if you're comfortable smoking, then for sure try a joint or something. But for grandma who wants to try it the first time, a nice chocolate or a nice gummy. Rosin Heads makes these really beautiful chocolates that are it tastes like a little peanut butter cup or like a raspberry truffle or whatever. Doesn't taste anything like weed. And those I find it's also fun at like a family dinner or something. It's hilarious. The number of people who go from horrified to really curious in record time is interesting, because they're all at some level. It's like, okay, I am curious. And
Okay, there always is the case for years. There was one time I was very big on like having the PAX vaporizer.
Yeah, which is also that's a lighter version of smoking, if you will. Like a vape is definitely another way to introduce it to people who haven't who maybe don't, if they're not a smoker, where smoking will cause coughing fits and it won't be an enjoyable experience. A vape's definitely a nice way to lean into that without but again, honestly, I still think you get less of an effect from a vape than you do from a joint. Like there's there's levels to the game, as they say, right?
Do you feel that you use the term onboarding? You didn't say sharing or enjoyment or trying something for the first time. You used like onboarding implies like all aboard. You got to test out this. Mercer's got some new software, and we have to onboard the 100 enterprise customers.
I mean, I am a marketer, right? So there's some overlap in the terminology. But yeah, I mean, I do think of it like that. It's you're introducing a new action to them, then you want to make sure that initial experience isn't a negative one, because obviously if they have a negative experience, they're not going to go back to it. Whereas if it was safe and it wasn't overwhelming, they didn't have some mental breakdown or get so high that they get scared and have to go to the hospital, which is very common for edibles. Like people think that, oh my god, I'm never coming back. It's like, just have a nap, you'll be fine.
The world has slowed down. I've heard the craziest things. Looking back some years, there were times completely stoned and someone with like a group of friends, and then there's always someone who's like, it's not working, let me have another gummy. It's still not working. I'm like, no, that was not. No, you don't eat the whole cookie. Holy shit!
Low and slow is the mantra with edibles. Is always start low dose and go slow, because it takes 20 to 40 minutes to start hitting your body unless it's nano emulsion or something where it hits faster. But generally speaking, the typical cookie or brownie or gummy or whatever takes, a half an hour or so to kick in. And it's very frequent that people will, think it's not working, and then they'll double down, and then suddenly they're having a little existential crisis of ego death.
This is fascinating, and we will, if you have the bandwidth, we may have to do another session in the future. But in the last 2 minutes we have you before we return to our complex and less weed inspired conversational areas, unless you're doing your next call is that. What in the last 2 minutes we have you, Riel, what do you say, if you haven't already, what else could you say to those people who, they're not 18, they're like 30, 40, 50, and they need a break, but the wife is saying no, 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 or the rabbi or the priest is saying this is not kosher, this is not the way of
Are the rabbis saying that? Like, I'm so curious,
there
because
are many of them.
really, because I've had this, I was actually very surprised at, I've had a couple of conversations with rabbis who were very pro cannabis, and it really surprised me of like, no, this is part of, this goes way back in our culture. And so I had a really interesting conversation with a Hasidic guy that was like, I couldn't believe how pro cannabis he was. And so I don't know how the culture treats it, but I mean, there is a lot of evidence that it was, a big part of Jewish culture. So I'm surprised to hear that. I've heard several people say, "Oh no, it's got its own carve out." You know what I mean? It's not. We don't consider it the same as, other drugs, or even better, that it's better than alcohol. And
I've been in many synagogues where the alcohol is free flowing in the midst of prayer. But God forbid you bring up the C word and you end up, they're like, oh, get this guy, is just nourished guy, the terrible marker. We don't want to hear about this. Of course.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, as I said, I don't want to be the guy that's, that's encouraging people to do anything that they don't want to do. I would just, as in everything with life, have a little bit of an open mind and make your own decisions, right?
That's the best way to say it. And on this beautiful, we will pause here in this beautiful discussion. And you heard it first. Rabbi Riel endorses marijuana. Everyone who doesn't smoke it. Oh,
you're a bunch of losers. You're putzes. That's it. You're a bunch of putzes if you don't smoke weed.
And we will pause here.
There's your clip for the